super windy. I hope you can hear me. So I am vegan, and people have asked me. My cat can only eat meat. I don't want to let my cat die. How do I justify feeding meat to my cat? Or other people hey, why aren't you friends with my husband who eats meat? Or somebody well, I won't become vegetarian unless you pay me this much money. Or somebody they're allergic to beans, and well, I have to eat meat because I'm allergic to beans. And so or at a store, maybe I am a cashier and I sell meat to people, and they're well, I need the money or something. I need to work my job, but the clients eat meat. So how do I rationalize any of this? How do I rationalize this? That is a goose. Guess what country I live in? Hong Kong, Canada. All right, so short answer, no. Long answer, yes, but only sometimes. So, short answer is, say you own a cat. You can reduce your guilt by renting a vegetarian, paying somebody to reduce their meat consumption. Because what happens if you save someone's life? Maybe you have to pay for the cost of running an animal sanctuary, but you've essentially, you save a cow's life. Let's say in this example, for the sake of easy math, that the worth of a cow is equal to the worth of a human. Obviously, you can argue that, but we're gonna just have easy math today. So if I save one cow and let them live a happy life in an animal sanctuary, then can I justify feeding another cow to my cat? No, because the cow is not a willing volunteer to die. You don't have the right to take away their life. You also don't have the right to enslave them, and you don't have the right to trade their life. Will it reduce your guilt? Yes it will. And is it virtuous to save a cow's life? Yes it will. But is there something else? So this values happiness, and of course, in the situation where we can have a utopian society, where society does develop to the point where we are empathetic towards animals as a society, then wow, that's amazing. And then there's all this unlocked potential happiness of life, and we can quantify happiness and quantify suffering and compare the two and say how many years of happiness and social bonds are equal to this much rape and torture and murder and kidnapping and etc. And we can compare that with humans or different livestock and animals and see how do we quantify and exchange and monetize all of this. But that's not how a utopia works, because there is the principle of permissible harm and the doctrine of productive purity, which I know nothing about. But basically it says that if you're going to be a vegan, you should at least be principled instead of just cruelty for the sake of results. Because the ends justify the means is a pretty cruel stance, and it's rather hypocritical to euthanize animals to prevent torture or to save one person's life but then murder another's, right? And then how would this apply? Then you would just murder humans, and obviously that's illegal unless you're doing it for the military, in which case I suppose you could monetize, save a cow, murder a civilian overseas for the sake of national interests. But the civilian you're murdering isn't giving you their consent. They're not a willing suicide volunteer. They aren't roadkill. So unless you're feeding your cat roadkill, or you find somebody to commit assisted suicide and then feed their corpse to your cat, then you don't really have the right to be feeding meat to your pets or to your family or selling it at a store. It can't be justified. You can rationalize the guilt away, but you can't justify the slavery and the murder. It's just immoral, and you don't have the right to kill somebody. Now, there are self-defense cases and there are law enforcement cases. So this is similar to terrorism, where I have to be really careful with what I say. If somebody's rights are being broken, then the authorities who want to protect people's rights would want to, in order to protect the victim, break somebody else's rights if that was the only way to protect the victim. And this is, of course, how you get terrorists and people shooting each other out of self-defense. So that's rather psychopathic, and it's not really justified, because even if there's a criminal shooting people, even if there's a serial killer, do you have the right to take away their life? And the answer is, well, there's the moral obligation to save lives. So here's the twist. The thing with killing humans is it produces blowback, because humans don't like it when you kill them. So it sets a bad precedent for veganism if you just go and kill people. If you wanted to kill people legally, you would have to join the military, and that would be your avenue for killing people. Still, somewhat hypocritical, sets a bad reputation for vegans if you're just going around killing people for the sake of a good cause, sure, but again, bad reputation. So, I think that would only apply in a world where there is zero possibility of society developing to become empathetic towards animals. And this is, of course, where we need this principle of permissible harm, where what can we actually do to save animals that is practical, that is still virtuous, and doesn't set a horrible, horrible precedent of everybody hating animal rights activists. And also doesn't make you sound like a fucking psychopath. So, yeah, you can save lives. But the problem with saving lives is if you're not feeding your cat, you can save just as many lives. You save a cow's life in order to feed another cow to your cat. Okay, so you've paid someone, rented a vegetarian to reduce the demand for meat consumption. This is where I was going back to animal sanctuaries. I meant to segue here into supply and demand. So if you reduce the supply, well, the supply is just going to replace what you saved. The person you saved, there's just going to be another cow because demand hasn't changed. But if you change demand, then suddenly there's a lower market force for corpses. There's a lower demand for corpses. And so if you just pay somebody, incentivize them with money to be vegetarian for, let's say, $300 worth of beef, worth of meals, and you can even reduce exploits of this system by picking people who are carnists or who would not be vegetarian anyways if you hadn't paid them, or even having like prize pools of whoever posts the most selfies of vegetarian food gets more of the prize pool for this Be a Vegetarian subsidy. And so you have this Rent a Vegetarian idea. It's a nice idea. There's the geese, and you're ultimately saving lives. But can you use that to justify murder? Well, no, because the means do not justify the results, because you have just as much power to save people's lives with or without your pet cat. Now, the grocery store is a bit different. Then you have to quantify life. So what is the market value of life, and how much money are you earning from being a cashier, and how much of that goes to saving lives? And I haven't actually thought about that yet. But if money is involved, right? Say you are a trophy wife or a trophy husband, there's money involved, then that's an entirely different question that I haven't actually thought about. And I actually sounded super psychopathic when I hadn't really thought about the principle of permissible harm, or what precedent does it set to be trading people's lives? But that is a question I think is good to ask. Can we monetize? Can we make people's lives a commodity and trade it online? Or how many cows is a human worth? How many chickens is a human worth? What does it depend on the living conditions, the torture? Can we understand by proxy that if we dislike torture, then the cow will dislike torture? How does the right to not be tortured correspond to the right to not be killed? Do we have the right to kill people? And so these are questions which hopefully we can give empathetic answers to. And so basically, I think an idealist response would be, no, you never have the right to kill anyone. You can minimize your guilt by saving other people's lives, doing a good deed here, doing a good deed there. But we don't actually have the right to kill people. Law enforcement doesn't have the right to kill people. Military doesn't have the right to kill people. Sure, it's legal, but it's not justified. There's the legal right to kill people, and then there's like the moral obligation to kill people, and then there's the long-term consequences of killing people, and then there's the justification, right? So from a utilitarian stance, you can justify killing people, but this doesn't apply to feeding your cat, or when there's no money involved. The number of people you can save by feeding your cat is going to be pretty much the same. Having a pet cat doesn't increase how many people you can save. And so, what is the change in torture? And these are difficult to quantify, because you can argue that everyone's life has a different worth, and it depends on the conditions of factory farming versus open range, and there's welfare involved, and you have to integrate torture over time to quantify suffering, and then convert that into a monetary value, and then suddenly you find like, oh, so are humans' lives worth $300? And what precedent does it set to just start murdering humans for the sake of saving animals? It's a very bad precedent. And so if we assume there's a possibility of society developing to become empathetic, then I don't think that armed terrorism is practical, because there's just so much blowback. It makes more sense for vegans to acquire political power by teaching people about virtuousness, the hype of being a good person, and how it can raise your mental state. And then utility monsters will get jealous and want to adopt vegan mental states, and sort of a hedonistic approach to virtuousness, where it feels good to not murder people, and it feels good to have a view that we have the right to decide whether we live or die. Yeah, I guess military war profiteers can rationalize that everybody's going to die anyways, but I would disagree, because I do think that cryostasis and uploading our consciousness into simulated realities can happen. So it's not definite that we're going to die. And if you say, well, the original body is all that matters, well, you could also say the original train of thought is all that matters, and the original train of thought often dies when we lose consciousness at nighttime. So if I am the same person as yesterday, then a simulated copy of myself on as an AI would also be myself. This is like the teleporter paradox, I believe. I forget the name. Anyways, that's it for the video. So I hope I answered my own questions, and I think that is a reasonable view that murder is never justified.